Welcome back to Life in the Trinity podcast. This is our 8th deep dive. We're focusing on Donald Fairbairn's Life in the Trinity, specifically reacting to chapter 4.
That's right. The big question coming out of that chapter is, what does it actually mean to be in the image of God?
Exactly. It's a huge concept. So to help us unpack it, we're pulling from a couple of really helpful sources.
We are. We've got Dr. Carmen Imes's book, Being God's Image, which is fantastic. And also Tim Mackey's Bible Project podcast, specifically his subseries on, you guessed it, the image of God.
Great resources. So our plan is to use them to explore, well, a few key things today.
Yeah, like what did image bearer mean historically, back in the ancient world?
Right. And then what do Imes and Mackey say it means biblically to be God's image?
And how does this whole idea kind of thread through the Bible's narrative? It's not just a Genesis thing.
Definitely not. And finally, the big one. How should understanding ourselves as God's image actually change how we see ourselves and, how we live?
The practical stuff.
The practical stuff. Okay, so let's start right there with the ancient Near East. What did image mean then?
Well, Dr. Imes points out something really interesting about the Hebrew word, selim, which means image.
Okay.
She notes it's related to words in other ancient languages from that area, words that clearly meant, like, physical objects.
What kind of objects?
Specifically idols, statues of gods that you'd find in temples, concrete things meant to represent the divine.
Gotcha. Tangible representation.
Exactly. And Tim Mackey over at Bible Project, he builds on this. He talks about how in neighboring cultures it was pretty common for kings to call themselves the image of a god.
Okay. So the king is the god stand-in.
Sort of, yeah.
Yeah.
And statues weren't just decorations. They, and sometimes the kings too, were seen as embodying the god somehow. They carried this sense of holiness, demanding respect, even reverence.
That really makes you think then about the Israelite temple, which famously had no idol of Yahweh.
Right. It's a huge contrast.
Yeah.
Could it be maybe that the reason there's no statue is because God had already put his image somewhere else?
You mean in his cosmic temple?
Yeah, exactly. In humanity itself. Maybe we are the intended image, not something made of stone or gold. It's quite a radical idea for the time.
Okay, so if we are the image, what does that involve, this representational role?
Imes quotes the theologian Mark Cortez, who puts it really well. He basically says the imago Dei, the image of God, is God's plan to make humans the physical way he manifests his presence in the world.
So we're like living signposts pointing to God.
Pretty much. We're appointed to remind creation, and maybe just as importantly, remind each other that God is present and active. N.T. Wright has that great phrase Imes uses like an angled mirror.
Angled mirror, how so?
Well, it's not just reflecting God passively. It's angled to reflect God's wise order into the world.
Okay, like bringing his goodness into creation?
Exactly. And at the same time, it's angled to reflect creation's praises and needs back to God. It's a dynamic two-way street.
That makes a lot of sense. And it connects directly to that idea of rulership or dominion back in Genesis 1, right? Verses 26, 28.
Absolutely. Humans are given this task rule over the fish, the birds, the animals. Ruling responsibly is part of exercising our image-bearing status. It's woven into our purpose.
But ruling can sound kind of harsh, maybe.
Yeah, and Mackey clarifies this really helpfully. He stresses it's not about, like, power-tripping exploitation. It's not about dominating destructively.
Okay, so what is it about?
It's more like imposing your will, yes, but for the purpose of cultivating, harnessing potential so life can flourish. Think about subduing a wild garden.
You mean like weeding and planting?
Right. You're bringing order to make it produce food and beauty. It requires work, planning, energy. It's active stewardship, not tyranny.
Responsible stewardship. I
Right.
like that. Okay, so that's the foundational idea. How does this theme develop as the Bible story continues?
Well, Imes highlights a key moment right after the flood with Noah.
Okay.
God blesses Noah and his family, and he repeats part of the original mandate. Be fruitful and increase in number and fill the earth. Genesis 9:1.
So the core purpose remains.
Exactly. Even after the huge disruption of the fall and then the flood, human dignity, our identity as God's image, it isn't wiped out. It endures.
But you said part of the mandate?
Yeah, interestingly, the command to subdue the earth from Genesis 1, it's not repeated there in Genesis 9.
Huh. What do you make of that?
Well, Imes doesn't definitively say, but it does make you wonder, right? Maybe it suggests something about how sin affected our ability to rule rightly, perhaps. It's food for thought.
It is. And you mentioned earlier this idea that Imes discusses from Daniel Block about Genesis 1 maybe being like a temple creation story,
Right. If we read Genesis 1 that way, as the creation of a cosmic temple,
then humans as the image are placed in the temple.
exactly. Like we're the commissioned representatives, the living presence of the divine ruler within his sacred space. Not just plopped into a generic world, but intentionally installed.
And that contrasts sharply with other creation stories from that time.
Massively. As Mackey explains, many ancient Near Eastern myths depict creation arising from, like, violent conflict between gods,
Yeah.
chaos and battle.
Right, gods fighting each other.
Yeah. And in those stories, usually only the king or maybe the priestly class was considered the image of a god. It was a way to legitimize their power, make everyone else serve them.
But Genesis 1, totally different vibe.
Totally. You have one God, no rivals, speaking creation into existence, orderly, good, purposeful. And the absolute peak is humanity, all humanity.
Male and female.
Explicitly male and female, both created in God's image. That was revolutionary. Saying every single person shares this high status, unheard of in that context.
Okay, so if everyone is God's image, this must have some serious real-world consequences, the practical implications.
Oh, absolutely. Iams really hammers this home. If we actually believe this, truly believe every human is God's image, it has to fundamentally change how we think about people.
How so?
Well, it means we have to interact with everyone, with a baseline of dignity and respect,
No.
because they reflect the Creator.
It's not just a nice theological idea, then.
Not at all. Iams calls it shoe leather implications. It directly confronts things like racism or discrimination against people with disabilities, or any way we try to dehumanize others.
Because if they bear God's image, treating them as less is, well, it's an affront to God himself.
Precisely. You can't claim to honor God while dishonoring his image bearers. It connects us, too.
How you mean?
Well, being God's image links us vertically, right, to
Mhm.
God. Our identity comes from him.
Okay.
But it also links us horizontally to each other. Since we all share this status, male and female, every ethnicity, every ability level, it demands community, collaboration, mutual respect.
And it links us to creation, too, doesn't it? That stewardship role.
Yes. Responsible care for the world God made is part of the job description, you could say.
Iams also makes a really crucial point about our value, our worth.
She does. It's not tied to what we do, not our productivity, not our job title, not our successes or failures.
Value is inherent.
Completely inherent, based solely on our status as God's image. It's a gift. We don't earn it.
That's so important. It counters that whole pressure to constantly perform.
Right. And she connects this to Sabbath. That rhythm of rest is a built-in reminder to stop, trust God's provision, and remember our worth isn't in our work. It guards against defining ourselves by our output.
But what about sin? Doesn't sin mess up the image?
It definitely does. Sin absolutely prevents us from perfectly reflecting God's glory. It mars the image, distorts it, no question.
But it doesn't erase it.
That's the key point Iams makes. Humanity retains this identity, even in our fallenness, our brokenness. The image is still there, even if it's tarnished or damaged. We are still image bearer.
Which means everyone still deserves that dignity we talked about.
Everyone. Always.
And then finally, there's Jesus. Iams touches on him as the perfect image.
Yes. It's brief, but vital. While every human bears the image, Jesus fulfills God's intention for it perfectly.
In his humanity.
Exactly.
Yeah.
His full humanity, hunger, thirst, tiredness, temptation, even death, shows us what being truly human, truly God's image, was meant to look like, even this side of Eden, without losing any dignity. He's the goal, the restored image.
Wow. Okay, so pulling this all together as we wrap up this deep dive, what are the main things we should take away?
Well, I think first, that historical context is key. Image meant representation, like a statue or a king representing a god.
Right. And second, humanity's role as that image God's representatives, tasked with reflecting his character and ruling responsibly, stewarding creation.
Third, and this is huge, the inherent dignity of all humans, because they bear this image, a dignity that sin damages but doesn't destroy.
Yeah, that's crucial. And fourth, Jesus as the ultimate perfect image, showing us what humanity restored looks like.
So it really invites you to think, doesn't it? How does really grasping this idea that you and everyone you meet are made in God's image, how might that shift how you see yourself?
How you see others, even the difficult ones.
Yeah, and how you see your role, your responsibility in the world God has placed you in.
Yeah.
Lots to chew on there.
Definitely. Well, that brings us to the end of this particular deep dive. Next week, we are jumping back into our main text, Donald Fairbairn's Life in the Trinity. We'll be tackling Chapter 5, What Went Wrong.
Looking forward to it.
Until next time on Life in the Trinity podcast, your introduction to theology with the help of the Church Fathers.
Remember to abide in the Godhead this week.